You know, I'm afraid of the dark.
Really? Really?
Hey guys, it's David here, and welcome to another Davey P Reviews. And obviously, as you can see, I have a special guest with me. So,
Where?
so please give a warm welcome to my best mate, Craig McKenzie.
Hello guys.
And today's film is a very good one because this is one I've just seen 3 hours ago.
Yep.
And
Because the film is 3 hours long.
Yeah, obviously. And as you probably guessed from the titles, the film today, The Green Mile. So, as you can probably guess, film review, so spoilers, so don't watch this if you've not seen the film, so
No.
go see the film first, then come back and watch this.
I was telling Dave before we started watching the film, the best way to experience this film is to go into it completely blind.
And I stand by that statement, because my mind is blown away by this movie.
I have blown his flagellate mind.
Yes, you have. Little drama piece for you there, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. So, let's get started with The Green Mile. So, we start out with an elderly man in a care home.
Named Carl. Who then applies balloons to his house and flies away.
With his abductees that he's taken with him. No, his
What
name
version of Up did you watch? At the beginning of the film we are introduced to an old man called Paul Edgecombe, who's living at an old residence home. And he likes to go out for walks in the morning, and he likes to visit a shed in the woods, which we don't really know why he's doing so until the end of the film. But we'll get that obviously in a minute or two. And whilst one evening, whilst he's watching television with all the other residents of the home, including his kind of lady friend, they're playing Top Hat on the television, and he starts to get a wee bit upset when they start doing the dance number to Heaven.
Heaven, I'm in heaven.
Really? We discussed this. After it kind of starts to get a bit upset, he goes off with his friend, or his friend kind of takes him away to kind of get him a cup of coffee, and kind of, for the two of them to be on their own to kind of try and find out what's wrong with him, and she asks him, you know, what's wrong and things, and he starts to talk to her about things which he's never discussed with anyone before. And he starts to talk about his time when he used to work on The Green Mile, which was the name, or the nickname, him and his colleagues gave to the death row block that he worked on, and then back in the 1930s when he was 44. And then through a nice transition we are taken back to that time so we can actually see the events unfold.
Yep, so we're cut now to the Depression period in the 1930s, 1935 was it? Yeah, 1935 to be exact.
Yep.
And we're introduced to a new inmate on the block, John Coffey. Not like the drink, but not spelt the same way either. So
You got it right after three
Yeah.
times. Three times you got it right. He keeps saying John Coffey with an R. It's like he only said it 15 times in the film, mate.
I know.
My name's John Coffey. Like the drink, just not spelt the same.
That means you don't add an R in it where it's not needed.
I don't know why I do it. So we cut to him, and he's presented to be an enormous man with hands like waffle irons. Yeah.
Which
As
is a
they-
quote from the book,
Mm-hmm.
for all you people out there who read the book.
I haven't read the book.
He hasn't read the book. I've read the book. I've watched the film countless times. This was his first time watching this film, so...
Yep. 4 hours, almost 4 hours ago now.
Yeah.
So, introduced to Coffey,
Coffee!
So we're introduced to John Coffey, a very gentle soul, a bit simple-minded at times as well. But that also gives us time to be introduced to the other inmates, the guards as well. And it gives us a bit of history and the relationship between both these characters and how they interact with one another. And that also introduces us to one of the key characters in the film, and it's not even a man or a woman. It's an animal, Mr. Jingles. which is the little mouse that visits the Green Mile on occasion. And at first people are saying, let's get rid of it, let's get rid of it. And it's like, it warms their hearts and they decide to keep it.
Now, at this particular point in time, we're also introduced, at the same time as being introduced to John Coffey, we're also introduced to Percy Wetmore, who is a new prison officer on the block. He's kind of very young, very inexperienced, and really takes a lot of kind of pleasure from the inmates' suffering, and knowing that, you know, he gets a kind of thrill from being in the position which he is in. He knows he has power over these people, and, you know, at one point in the film he references the prison as being a bucket of piss to drown rats in. So that kind of gives you a very naive look into his kind of thought process and what he's thinking, because obviously the guards are looking to, you know, they understand that these people are there for a reason. They're not stupid, but they also, you know, do it with an air of humility, and you know, the morality, and you know,
essentially he's an asshole, pretty much.
Yeah, basically, and all the other guys are good guys.
Yeah, everyone else is likable except for Percy because he's an absolute prick.
Yeah, but when we are introduced to Mr. Jingles, Mr. Jingles starts to connect with one of the inmates called Edouard Delacroix,
or Del for short.
Or Del for short. And Percy and Delacroix don't really get on. In fact, for some reason, Percy, even before certain plot elements kind of come into effect, there is very much a feeling that Percy just despises Del. It's evident actually in the very first scene the two of them share together, where Percy breaks Del's fingers.
Just because he laughed at him, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, he didn't even laugh at him, he smiles at him.
Yeah.
Because he's been made to leave the night. Because when he brings in John Coffey, he's giving it, dead man, we got a dead man walking here, and he's been all, you know, shown off and stuff, and Tom Hanks' character, Paul Edgecombe, calls him up on it and says, you know, get off my block. I really don't care where you go just now, just as long as it isn't here. And he's made to leave, and because he's been made to leave and Del kind of finds this funny, he breaks his fingers.
What a dick!
But when we're introduced to the little mouse, when we're introduced to Mr. Jingles, he starts to develop a relationship with Del, where Del, it's actually Del that gives him the name Mr. Jingles, and it's also Del that discovers that Mr. Jingles can do the tricks that he does, like chasing the spool and running from one arm to the other and all that kind of thing.
He is a circus mouse.
He is a circus mouse, yeah. Then, as kind of the film kind of progresses along those lines, exploring and developing the relationships and the changing of circumstances between these characters, we are then introduced to a third inmate named Billy Wharton, or William Wharton.
Or Wild Bill.
Or Wild Bill, nicknamed so because of his antics. And it's kind of transpired that he is responsible for multiple kind of murders and things like that across the country, and they've finally caught him and they've brought him into justice. Now, at this particular point as well, we find out through the kind of the prison boss, and a kind of a professional exchange with Paul, that his wife is suffering from a brain tumour the size of a lemon. So that's kind of harsh, and obviously Paul, being on kind of good friendly terms, being quite close to his boss and things like that, both in a professional and in a kind of friendly, personal setting, really kind of feels for not only his boss but his friend. His friend is going through this horrible time.
Yeah.
And he, you know, it's upsetting for him as well.
Same thing, kind of the same thing with Paul as well. He's suffering from urinary infection as well.
It's not the same thing as a tumour.
No, obviously not. But
it's an ailment of sorts.
Yes.
And he's kind of really struggling with that. He's in extreme pain. You can see it when you're watching the film that he's really suffering. You know, with it, he's exhausted and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Sweaty. is
Yep.
really hardcore. You could just imagine the pain that he's going through at the time through his facial expressions.
So when Billy the Kid comes into the prison and starts off a kind of riot between him and the guards, he knees Paul in the crotch and Paul sinks to the floor, and they manage to subdue him with no help from Percy.
Because he's a coward. Prick.
And they're all kind of made to leave the mile, and Paul says, you know, he's got this and all that kind of thing till they come back. But as soon as they leave, he just sinks to the floor. And he's like, ah!
Boss, I need to have a talk with you.
Yeah. And then he hears from the end of the mile that John Coffey needs to speak to him. And, you know, reluctantly he gets up to speak to him. And John Coffey grabs him through the bars, places a hand on his
ding dong. Come on.
No. Places a hand on his and thank you. On his manhood, and cures him miraculously so. And he opens up his mouth, and all these flies spill out of his mouth. And when they kind of fly up into the air, they all start to disappear slowly, one by one.
That man needs to see a priest.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we get a kind of inkling, and then Paul is then able to go to the toilet as if he's never had any kind of problems. So.
And gives one of the most epic faces you've probably ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit like this. And then him and John then start to develop a kind of mutual respect
for one another. Because
Paul realises that this man is extraordinary for whatever reason. Doesn't know the full extent of his powers. But he does have enough of an understanding of this man and the inclination of goodness within this man that he feels propelled to make further inquiries into why John is there. John has been accused of the rape and murder of 2 young girls, which Paul believes that John isn't guilty of.
I mean, how can a man like that kill those 2 kids? It doesn't make sense.
I mean, certainly from the offset, and this is partly due to the performance given by Michael Clark Duncan, but also the writing and the way everything's shot. But in particular, his portrayal of John Coffey, that from the minute we meet him, although being taken on the ride of the film, we instantly get the feeling that there is more to this man, and that there is goodness in him, and that he can't possibly be in there for why he is. So they start to develop a relationship that way, a mutual understanding of each other. Paul makes these inquiries into John's past with no avail, and can't really kind of figure out a way to prove John's innocence. There's a lot against John in the case, and because of the kind of racial attitudes of the time, a lot of people really just kind of believe that, you know, he did it. He done it purely because of the colour of his skin and things like that as well, and the fact that he was holding the 2 gay girls. I mean, fair enough, obviously, when we see that particular scene, it is harrowing because he's holding the 2 girls and he's like wailing at the sky. You know, and he just keeps saying, I've tried to take it back, but I was too late, and all that kind of thing. And that doesn't really kind of resonate with you, the importance of that phrase, until later on in the film. But when he takes Edgecombe's kind of sickness away, he says, I took it back, I made it better, I took it back. So then it starts to make sense that he tried to heal the 2 wee girls, but because they were dead, he couldn't do it. Yeah. So after all that's kind of taken place, it transpires that Percy wants to be up front for the next execution. Paul wants him to leave, he doesn't want him to stay on the Green Mile, but Percy says that if he doesn't get hosting an execution, that he'll stay indefinitely, even though Paul knows that he's put in an application for a mental asylum.
Because he's an asshole.
Because he's an asshole. So Paul agrees that for the next execution he will be responsible for. He'll be in charge of it. Yeah.
Yeah, for Dell's execution.
Yeah. And during that time, a kind of strange tranquility goes through the prison. There isn't any problems. Percy's attitude, although completely fake, is much more pleasant.
Yeah.
Because he's getting his own way. He's trying to be professional. He's even going as far as kind of talking to the other guards and kind of asking them for pointers and tips, and they're saying, "Yeah, what you were saying is right," and all that kind of stuff. And it seems like he's kind of taking things a lot more serious. His attitude, like I said, has just completely changed. We can't help but feel as an audience that's because he's getting his own way, and that it is leading towards something else. So then, Delacroix is coming back from showing the other guards of the prison the tricks that Mr. Jingles does. And during that time that he was away, Paul and Howell and Dean and all that kind of thing have been kind of practicing or doing a rehearsal for the execution with Percy and for Percy, so that Percy knows what he's doing and all that kind of thing. He knows exactly what he has to do, one of which being
putting the sponge in the water so the electricity would go through the brain like a bullet, as mentioned in the film.
Yeah. So, and he knows this. He knows this.
He was taught this.
He's been told everything, he's been shown everything, he's practiced, there has been rehearsals, at least 2 rehearsals before the actual execution itself. He knows exactly what he has to do. When Delacroix comes back with Mr. Jingles from showing all the other prisoners, Percy is, trying to be friendly with him, but Delacroix knows that he's just being incredibly fake. And Percy goes, "Boo!" And he falls over, and it just kind of sets the whole thing off again, like the kind of the hate between the two and all that kind of stuff. He's like, "Oh, come on, I was kidding on," and all that kind of stuff. And all the other guards really just dislike Percy as much as the audience does at this particular point in time. Paul's trying to get rid of him. Howell has actually already went for him a couple of times before this because of his attitude towards the prisoners, towards the colleagues, towards Howell, all that kind of thing. So, so Delacroix is put back in the cell. Percy is then seized by Billy the Kid through the bars, and he's harassed by Billy, and he wets himself.
As probably most people would if you were confronted by a killer.
If you were confronted by Sam Rockwell.
Yeah.
So he wets himself, and he is ridiculed for it by the prisoners, with the exception obviously of John Coffey. John Coffey, being a gentle soul, doesn't take part. Billy the Kid obviously gives him hassle for it. The guards, I think, are kind of secretly pleased, but they know that this is going to backfire. They know that this is going to make things 10 times worse. Yeah. And they try to, they try to appeal to him, and he his whole attitude now.
Everything on the Green Mile stays on the Green Mile.
Yeah, but with Percy doesn't see it that way. Percy, more, his pride is damaged. Yeah. Makes things 10 times worse, and obviously Delacroix, seeing it as a shift in the balance of power between the two, gives him ridicule for it again, as well, which just again accentuates the hate between the two.
So, due to tensions between guards and prisoners, we see Delacroix is happy with Mr. Jingles, and then all of a sudden Mr. Jingles takes a walk, and we're wondering, okay, where is he going? And who should be walking past as that happens?
Percy.
And what does he do? You can probably guess what he's going to do. He stomps on it.
Stamps on Mr. Jingles.
And Delacroix's face, that no! It's like, I was like that when I first saw it. I was like, no! You son of a bitch! So everyone is upset with Mr. Jingles' death, and we as the audience are shocked as well, because we didn't expect it to happen so soon, but it does. But then Coffee says, "Bring him to me."
Sorry, you said Coffee.
I redeemed it by saying Coffee.
Sorry.
And he says, "Bring him to me." And
Paul picks up Mr. Jingles. Obviously Percy has walked away, happy at the fact that he's killed Del's mouse.
Prick.
Puts Mr. Jingles in John Coffey's hands, and John Coffey begins to breathe on him. It was like he was in the room.
Without the light effects, obviously.
Obviously, by this point Paul has already experienced this firsthand, that John has healing hands. the other three main guards that we've met are watching this, and they're seeing this for the first time, and they can't believe it.
Mm.
And John puts Mr. Jingles down on the floor, and he scurries across the floor as if nothing ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
And all the guards are dumbfounded by this. They're
Awe-inspired.
They're all inspired. Yeah, they can't believe what they've just witnessed.
Mm-hmm.
And so Paul and Brutal, Boss Hill, go and speak to Percy. They tell him that he hasn't succeeded in killing the mouse. Percy obviously goes to check this and sees that the mouse is fine. Goes back to Paul and Brutal and is like, "You switched them, you bastards," and all this kind of stuff. And Paul and Brutal just fucking slam him down on old Sparky, hold him against the chair, the electric chair,
Ignite the son of a bitch!
With their batons out, and just basically say to him, "Look, your attitude needs to change here, son, because if it doesn't, you know, we know people too, job be damned, you know, you can't threaten us with your links to your uncle who's the mayor, or
your supposed names.
Yeah, when, you know, you're pulling shit like this, so we will, so basically, you'll be out and you'll do what you have to for the execution, but once that's done, we want you off the mile."
Mm-hmm.
And Percy agrees to this.
And we cut to Dell's execution, which was a hard scene to watch because what does Percy do in the execution?
Well, before we get to that, there is also, to make Dale feel better, because he's worried about what will happen to Mr. Jingles when he's not around, Boss Hill and Paul say that they're going to put Mr. Jingles in the Mouseville in Florida, which is like a big mouse circus, which makes him feel better.
Oh, as anybody.
And, you know, helps to kind of calm him down with the pre-execution jitters.
Mm-hmm.
And then they obviously lead Delacroix into his execution, where Percy is standing waiting for him at the chair, with obviously the audience of witnesses and things to witness the execution.
And what does this prick forget to do? He forgets to wet the sponge.
Well, the thing is that we actually see him contemplate. He doesn't actually forget. He
puts
goes
it
to
in,
put
but
the sponge
he
in the
doesn't
bucket
dampen it.
and doesn't dampen it.
So then he puts the dry sponge on his head and roll onto, and that is the most horrendous scene.
But it's pretty harrowing. I mean, certainly when you watch the film, I wouldn't say there's necessarily any scenes which are particularly gory.
But that
gruesome,
was a close.
But that particular scene
one.
is very hard to watch.
Right, I can't watch that scene when he lights up and it's blue.
Yeah.
I can't watch that.
The blue flames of electricity bursting through his face and things. It's very. I mean, it's not. It is. Don't get me wrong. It's particularly gory, but it doesn't focus on the gore.
No.
Like you just
it focuses more on everybody's horrific reactions.
Which I actually think makes it.
I think
more
one of the
effective.
scenes I quite liked was when Tom Hanks grabs a person and is like, "You son of a bitch, look!
Yeah.
Look!" And it's like...
Because we as an audience, man, we're really... Anything bad that happens to Percy, we are rooting for.
Yeah.
So, when he kind of turns away with tears in his eyes, with his hands over his mouth, can't even believe what he's done himself, Tom Hanks just grabs him, turns him around, and is just like, look what you done, you son of a bitch. You watch what you've done. And he's made to watch as Delacroix kind of burns from the inside out, and it's a pretty gruesome scene. And then comes the bit that Dave cheered at. David?
Was when Percy touches the corpse of Delacroix and David Morse's character dislikes this, and he makes a comment and then BAM! Punch to the face, and I'm like, yes! The prick deserves it!
He says, when Howell looks at Delacroix lying on the table, all burned and stuff, he looks up at Percy, and Percy says, "I didn't know the sponge was supposed to be wet."
Bang!
And it's like, yes!
Whoa!
Get it!
Go
son!
on, David Morse!
Yeah, so he lets Percy have it, busts his lip, and Paul's like, he's not worth it, he's not worth it. But he's like, how can you say that? Look what he done up those stairs. And he's just like, we as an audience are just like, yeah, just give it up.
It was worth it.
But
for
you know,
us.
like up until that point, obviously things have been bubbling, and you've been watching things kind of transpire, and you've been when the punch comes, it's like when George McFly punches Biff. It's just like, yes, get it. It's like take it.
Or for all you Game of Thrones fans, when Jon Snow punches Ramsay Bolton almost to death, you were like, thank fuck he gets what he deserves.
I don't get that reference because I've never watched Game of Thrones. Sorry. Anyway. So, after that's kind of happened, basically, Percy is made to honour his promise that he would leave. But before he can leave, obviously, he has some other things that he needs to do around the prison and such. So, now, at this particular point, Paul and his wife go to visit Paul's, the kind of, Hal, the prison boss, who with the ill wife, and she's having a good day and things like that. But he starts to think that maybe if John can heal him of his illness and heal Mr. Jingles, that he could possibly heal Hal's wife of a brain tumour.
Yeah.
So he starts to develop this idea that, you know, we could never get Hal's wife to the prison, but maybe if they can't take Hal's wife to John Coffey, maybe they can take John Coffey to Hal's wife.
Yeah. So then they come up with the plan to drug Wild Bill into a state where he can contemplate what's happening. And Percy, what do they do with him? Well,
love this bit.
They put him in a straitjacket, a mental straitjacket, tie him up at the mouth as well, and throw him into the solitary confinement cell, which I thought was a good touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so rewarding just seeing his wee face and that, and then shut the door on. It's like, fucking take it, you dick. Oh, it's so good, man.
So they get John Coffey out of the cell, and as he's getting led out, he's suddenly grabbed by Wild Bill and having a weird
kind
seizure.
of convulsion thing, where John Coffey afterwards says that when Bill grabbed his arm, that he was able to see and feel all the bad things that Bill had done before being caught.
Yeah.
And we don't quite, I mean, certainly it kind of registers with us that, you know, we already knew he was a bad man before, but it's not really explained much further than that until slightly later.
So they take John to Paul's friend's house. He does the good deed, seems very good at the time.
Manages to cure Hal's wife of the tumour, which is a very touching.
But he's not coughing up the flies.
He's not covering up the flies, no.
And we're like, okay, why is he not doing that? That normally happens before.
And normally, obviously, any time John heals anyone, when he takes away the illness or whatever, he then coughs up the flies. But when he removes the tumour from Hal's wife, he doesn't do it. He keeps them in. He doesn't let them out. And at this particular point, we're kind of wondering why. Paul and Howell come to the idea that maybe it's because he's keeping the badness in him, so that he'll kind of quietly pass away before being led to the chair, which he's earned. If he wants to do that, he's earned that. He's earned the right to die peacefully rather than on the electric chair for the goodness he's done.
So back to the Green Mile, everything seems fine. They have a word with Percy and they come to the conclusion that they do this, we do that, everything that's on the Green Mile stays on the Green Mile, all seems fine.
Yeah.
So they unrestrain him, let him out, and then Coffey suddenly grabs Percy and pukes the flies into his mouth.
Yeah.
Seems very hygienic. Yeah, you should try it.
I wouldn't recommend you try it. It's very overrated.
Yeah. So, and then he looks comatose, and we're like, okay. And Percy, and he just walks to Wild Bill's cell, and we're like, okay.
Wild Bill's giving it all. Hey there, limp noodle.
What are you looking at?
What you want? You want to suck my diddle?
And then shot dead.
Where did I even get that from?
Good question. Yeah, Percy shoots Wild Bill dead.
In his cell.
And then coughs up the flies.
Yeah. So we then realise that John Coffey was essentially keeping the badness in him to give to Percy to then
Do the deed.
to Bill. And he done it so that he could punish...
Too bad me. They too bad me. I'll punish them both.
Percy's comeuppance, he's still comatose, and where does it lead him to? The most funniest outcome you could probably imagine.
Yep. So rather than him getting that job transfer to Briar Ridge Mental Institution, he ends up being the transfer to Briar Ridge Mental Institution and the ultimate yes of comeuppance.
So he gets what he wants, but just not how he wanted it.
No, he wanted a job there where he could maltreat and mistreat the patients, and instead he now is a patient.
Yeah. So then we reach the climax of the film, which is leading up to John Coffey's execution.
So let me take over from here, because I want you to talk about the last bit.
Yeah.
Okay? Because obviously I've seen this countless times before. I want Dave to speak of the end, being a person who has obviously experienced this film for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So John and John Coffey are sitting in the cell, and you know, Paul is like, look, like, what you want, you like, just name it. I'll leave the door unlocked and you can see how far you can run if that. And you know, John's like, don't be so foolish like that. Why would you do that for me? And in one of the most powerful pieces of American cinema, in my opinion, with my man Tom Hanks. I love Tom Hanks, and I especially love Michael Clarke Duncan in this film. This was one of his first films. He was Oscar nominated for the film, and you can see why.
Yeah.
And the two of them are talking, and John says, Paul says, on the day of my judgment, when I stand before God and He asks me why did I kill one of His truest miracles, what am I supposed to say to Him? That it was my job. My job. And it's like, oh man, so like the lines in that particular segment are just, the dialogue is just so
just
powerful.
The morale as well. It's just like, God, that is
So
so
strong.
heartbreaking for him.
And John says, you tell God on the day of your judgment that it was a kindness that you done, that you put me out my pain and my misery, and that you set me free, you set my soul free, and all that kind of stuff. It's like, oh.
It's like, God.
So when Paul and John are sitting in the cell, and obviously after they've had that amazing segment where Paul's worrying about his soul, and you know, the fact that he's having to kill one of God's truest miracles, he says, well, if we can't set you free, what can we do for you? And John Coffey states what he wants for his last meal, and also says that he's never seen a flicker show, or never seen a film. And so the guys set up a kind of cinema in the prison for him, and they watch Top Hat.
And that would explain why Paul cries at the beginning of the film.
Because that was the last film, the first and last film that John Coffey watched with the four men, with Paul, with Hill, with Dean, and the other character. We really should have looked at that guy's name before we started the review. Then it's time to lead John to Old Sparky.
Through the Green Mile.
Through the Green Mile. Paul, Howell, Dean, and the other colleague that's
Barry
there.
Pepper's character.
Barry Pepper's character. Yeah, I think that is Dean.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so. Then start walking John Coffey to the Green Mile, and John Coffey starts telling them about a dream that he had, that he took the two dead girls to see Mr. Jingles
Perform
at Mouseville, and how they laughed and all that kind of thing. Now, the thing that we've both not mentioned is the fact that the reason why Percy killed Wild Bill, and the reason why John Coffey felt the need to punish Wild Bill, was because when Wild Bill touched John Coffey's arm, John Coffey was able to see all the bad things that he'd done, and he shows that to Paul, and Paul sees that it was actually
Wild Bill
that killed the two girls, not John Coffey. John Coffey stumbled across their bodies and tried to take it back, tried to heal them,
and
because they were dead. Death being eternal, death being
can't fix.
the end. You can't bring people back from death. You can only cure ailments and illnesses. We now know as an audience and Paul knows, and I believe that the Howell and Dean and things like that, they would know that John Coffey's innocent because obviously Paul would have explained that to them, but obviously they wouldn't know for definite. But I think by that particular point in time, they've seen the amazing things that he can do. They know, they too have developed a relationship with John enough to know that although they don't have concrete proof that John didn't do it, that they know in their hearts that John could never be capable of doing anything like that.
Yeah.
So they all know that they're leading an innocent man
to death.
To the chair. Which makes that particular bit where John Coffey's talking about the two dead girls and Mr. Jingles and all that, all the more heartbreaking because we see that obviously with the executions leading up to John Coffey, that it's part of their job. They're very they're non-emotional about it. They just kind of get on with it. With John Coffey, it's so different.
Yeah,
so different.
It's just
he's the one telling them that things are going to be okay, rather than them being the one to say to him that he'll be okay. So he's led to the chair, and at the beginning of the film, there's a line which helps convey John's childish personality, his innocence, when he asks if the lights are switched off at night. He says that he doesn't like the dark, that he's scared of the dark. And that's what makes the end all the more emotional. And this is where I'll get Dave to talk about the end of the film.
Yeah, it's just of course they set him an old Sparky, and it's just also saying like how he feels the hatred of all the people that are watching. It's just so heartbreaking when you see David Morse's character saying, just ignore them, just listen to us, we respect you. You hear that?
We don't hate you.
Exactly. It's just...
And then feel what we were feeling because we don't hate you.
And it's like, oh man. And of course they set them up, and you see Barry Pepper crying away. It's just like, wipe your face when you get up, Dean. Of course. And he does that. You're like, oh man.
So hard for them.
So it's hard for them as well, not just John. And then the classic line of Tom Hanks saying the deed, saying that a current of electricity will go through you, and as they put the fold over them, it's like, please no, I'm not afraid of the dark. And it's like, oh God, Jesus. And he was,
don't turn off the lights, boss. Don't put me in the dark.
oh God,
I'm scared of the dark.
Jesus,
oh my Jesus.
Oh man.
Oh God. It's like, I'm surprised. Oh jeez. Then Tom Hanks starts to tear a wee bit.
Hell starts to tear.
And they all start tearing. Like,
They all
Jesus
start
Christ.
tearing out.
And that's when the audience members ought to start tearing as well. If not a little bit before. And then roll, and it's just like before Tom Hanks says the words roll
Well,
onto
the time they host the executions at 10 o'clock at night, and throughout the film with each every execution we see the seconds ticking down to 10 o'clock. When it comes to John Coffey, the seconds tick down to 10 o'clock.
and they keep going.
But they keep going. And it's because Paul
He can't say the
can't
words.
bring himself to say roll on to for the guy to pull the switch.
And then Morse has to come over and say, you haven't said it.
Yeah.
You need to say the words.
Yeah,
and it's
he
like,
needs to
oh
say-
God, no, don't
It's like
say the
so hard.
words.
He can't. It's like so hard for him to say it. He just can't.
And then it's just roll on to.
And
then it's just that.
we see John Coffey seize up, but then we don't see anything else. Unlike all the other
It's just-
executions, with the other executions that we had in the film, the camera lingered on them. Well, it didn't linger on them, but it focused more on them, and there was more shots of the actual kind of execution.
Whereas
taking
this,
place. With John Coffey, you see John Coffey seize up, and then it cuts back to Paul, and the tears in his eyes rolling down his cheeks. The lights below
breaking.
behind him, showering the set with sparks, and it's just an extremely potent and very powerful scene.
Yeah, I'll admit it was very, very powerful.
So once that's kind of been said and done,
He puts the St. Christopher back on his neck.
yeah, there was when Coffey healed Hal's wife of the tumour, she gave him a St. Christopher to put over his neck.
To protect him.
Now they had to take that off him before he got electrocuted.
Yeah.
So when he's lying on the table, Paul puts the charm back on him, so that he has it back, so that it, for religious purposes.
And that's where the story, in terms of flashback, comes to an end.
Yeah.
We cut back to the beginning, and we finally get to see what was in that shed.
So elderly Paul, takes the woman that he's friends with and who he's been recounting this marvellous tale to about this innocent man with the healing hands, to the shed in the hills, and they both get down on the floor, and what should be in the corner but a little cigar box, and out comes Mr. Jingles.
Mr. Jingles! Mr. Jingles! And we were so happy when you see that Mr. Jingles. Even though it was an elderly mouse, though. It was still so happy just to see him come out of the box.
So by healing Mr. Jingles, John Coffey has infected him with life. And because obviously the mouse is now like what, 80-year-old?
Yeah, because Paul says he's like 108.
And Paul says he's
that mouse
108 years old,
as well, like him.
So the and it's at that particular point in time that, through a monologue at the end of the film, that Paul kind of says that he is 108 years old, and that's his curse for making John Coffey ride the lightning, for sending John Coffey off to the chair, is to watch and to live a long life and to watch his friends and loved ones pass and for him to remain. And he ends the film in such a wonderful way where he says that we all have a death to pay, but sometimes the green mile, meaning life, is just so long.
And then it just cuts to Mr. Jingles sleeping in the box, and then it cuts to black.
Box, yeah.
It's like, oh man. And that's the Green Mile.
The Green Mile. So, as someone who has read the book and has watched the film, and as anyone out there who's watched the film and read the book will know, the film and the book are actually very, very similar. Frank Darabont done a fantastic job doing the screenplay for the film. A lot of the elements from the book made it in. Certain elements were omitted.
Yeah, because you told me there was in the book Paul's wife dies in a bus accident.
Yeah, towards the end of the book, when Paul and his wife Jan are a bit older, they're involved in a bus accident where everyone dies except Paul, and the rain is pouring down. It's a very dramatic and very heartbreaking scene actually, where the rain is pouring down and he looks up through the rain and he sees John Coffey standing in the darkness, and he shouts to John to come over and to heal Jan and to help Jan, but obviously he can't because he's no longer here. He's a spirit, and his spirit is only here to take Jan to heaven. And it's a very sad piece. Actually, I can maybe see why they omitted it from the film, because I think to have that in the film, it just wouldn't gel well with the tone that Frank Darabont had set up through the film.
I think it was fine the way
because even in the book, I think anybody that's read the book would kind of say that Stephen King has this habit of breaking the tone with something that sometimes feels like it kind of comes out of nowhere. There are multiple examples. I wouldn't be able to kind of go into them just now because, it would ruin books for you, but read a few of his books and you'll know exactly what I mean. He kind of gives plot points away before they happen, and it's like, oh, okay, so that's happening. So so that was something. Another thing as well is that one of the carers in the care home is actually supposed to be like a kind of remanifestation of Percy.
No.
And this guy kind of maltreats Paul and kind of bullies him and things, and he kind of starts to realise that this guy, now that the tables have turned, he's now a kind of inmate at this old folks home.
Yeah, like a role reversal.
And the guard / attendee is basically a remanifestation of Percy, and again that's his punishment. So not only does he have to endure a long life watching his friends and loved ones die, he also has to be be the one being harassed by the kind of Percy character. And it is that, as far as I'm aware, I think that's something that happened by accident. Stephen King didn't actually mean that to happen, and it was only when he finished the book he went, oh, that's nice the way they've got that kind of symmetry there. But they kind of done away with that. I think it would have kind of bogged down the plot a bit to have... I mean, it's not kind of said that this guy's supposed to be a reincarnation of Percy, because that's not the case.
It's suggested.
But it's supposed to be... No, because it's not even like a kind of supernatural thing. It's just supposed to be that their traits are very similar. But that Paul, in his old frame of mind, thinks that he's been sent... He's a re-manifestation of Percy to punish him as well. For the things that he done to Percy and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's something they omitted from the movie, which actually I can see why they done it, because I think it would have bogged down the film a wee bit too much.
Let's just say about the film as well, the acting in it is
casting and acting
very, very well done. I think like all the characters in the film, or all the actors that were used, fit the character perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just like
Tom Hanks. You know, you can never go wrong with Tom Hanks in a film, except maybe The Da Vinci Code.
Yeah.
Not
even seen that one either.
No. You don't need to. But yeah, so anything that you put Tom Hanks in, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I might be slightly biased. I treat Tom Hanks like I treat Steven Spielberg. I don't think the guy can do anything wrong. Anything he's in, he just brings a kind of everyman quality. His presence, his artistic choices, the way he conveys emotions and all, the character beats and everything is just fantastic. I really love everything that Tom Hanks does, and in particular The Green Mile, what he does in that is just fantastic. Like I said, that bit where he's in the cell with John Coffey and they have that exchange towards the end, and then obviously when he's standing there and he just can't bring himself to say Roland too. I mean, you're there with him. You're really there with him. I mean, you yourself, you can't say, you don't want him to say Roland too either, but you know he has to, but you just feel that, you feel that kind of, that intensity and that. You just want the situation to stop. You just want another alternative out of it, but there is none. So it's like, another good thing is Michael Clarke Duncan's performance as John Coffey, who we sadly lost a few years ago. I know, that was a real shame. And it was this film that everybody quoted him for. It was this film that they used pictures from to show him as John Coffey, and that bit where he's watching the picture and the light from the projector is coming out from behind him, so he looks almost like ethereal and angel-like himself. And anybody that ever worked or everybody that ever knew Michael Clarke Duncan said that, you know, he was exactly like John Coffey. Like, he was just a gentle man and all that kind of stuff. And the fact that we've lost him in real life just makes this performance so much more potent, so much more powerful. I know towards the end he was in a lot of stuff that was slightly questionable and maybe a bit B-movie-ish. Daredevil. I'm looking at you, Scorpion King. I actually really like Daredevil. Well, not Ben Affleck, but I liked his portrayal as Kingpin. Okay, I'll let you off of that one. It's his performance in this film is just top notch. And the thing is, the supporting cast, the actor that plays Percy, the actors that play like Brutal Hill and Dean Stanton and all that kind of stuff, they're all amazing. Very well done. Guy that plays Hal, what's his name? John Cromwell? James Cromwell. He gives a brilliant performance as well. Sam Rockwell, guy who plays Edward Delacour, who actually sadly passed away not that long ago either. Oh no. The guy that plays Edward Delacour. So these people, the cast, I would say for me that this is one of my favourite films because everything, the casting, the direction, and the screenplay are all perfect. It's a perfect film. So, ratings. Yeah. How would you give this film? So, I'm kind of slightly biased in the fact that I think this film is an example of a perfect film. The casting, the directing, the screenwriting, the material that they had to go on before the actual book itself. I would say that this is a perfect example of a film. Stellar cast, amazing performances. It is one of the only films to have made me laugh and made me cry and made me kind of properly rage at the telly. So yeah, I would say, a very solid 5 stars. So much so that I was like, when I heard he hadn't seen this film, I was like, you need to see this film. So you know, 5 stars definitely.
Yeah.
What about you? I mean, obviously, because I'm really interested to see what you think, because obviously you've never seen the film before.
So, like Craig says, he pressured me to see this, and having seen it for the first time like 4 hours ago, my God, was this a very good film. There's like interesting characters, like a basic plot, and it's just like the acting, the directing, the cinematography, the production design as well. It was all very well done, and it's rare that a film like that comes along and like ticks all the boxes. So I agree with you. It's definitely worth like a 5 out of 5.
Excellent.
So that's the end of the review, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, like and subscribe to my channel for future more content. And thank you, Craig, for joining us on this movie review.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And be aware, guys, there might be some future reviews later on where Craig and also my best mate Harrison might be joining us as well. So
Yep.
Look forward to that. Craig, is there something you want to say?
Yeah, just I don't currently have a channel up at the moment, but please do keep an eye out, because I may be posting some videos in the future of my own, not necessarily movie reviews. I'll keep that to this guy, but I'll be doing reviews of some nice geeky stuff, collections, collectibles, replicas, and more.
You better invite me along though.
Right. And with that, we'll see you on the other side.
Alright, so again, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you had a blast watching this review. So I'll see you next week for a gaming video. So see you later, guys.
See you later, guys.